The first time she tried to evict me, I honestly thought it was a prank. Like maybe my buddy from the marina had finally snapped and decided to mess with me for fun. Then I saw the letterhead, the official-looking stamp, the smug little signature at the bottom, and the woman standing in my driveway like she owned the oxygen. I'm Mason Klein, former Navy, quiet by nature, the kind of guy who'd rather fix a busted winch than argue with strangers. And I live in a weather-beaten cabin my granddad built in the mid-1940s at the edge of a small lake outside a town called Alder Hollow. Not a resort town, not a destination, just trees, water, and folks who wave when they pass you on the road. I'd been drinking my coffee on the porch when a black SUV rolled up slow, tires crunching on my gravel like it was making a point. Out stepped Marla Hensley, president of the Cedar Crest Shores Homeowners Association. Crisp blazer, white teeth, sunglasses big enough to hide a conscience, and perfume strong enough to pick a fight with the pine air. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was doing. She walked right up, extended an envelope like she was serving me in court, and said, "Mr. Klein, you have 30 days to vacate the premises." I blinked at her like she'd started speaking another language. "Vacate," I repeated slow. "My cabin. This structure is in violation," she said, voice sweet the way people get when they're trying to sound reasonable while doing something ugly. "We've received complaints that your property is contaminating the lake. The board has voted to protect the community." Protect the community. She said it like she was saving children from a burning building. I stared at her, then past her, at the water glinting through the trees, calm as glass. My cabin sat there the way it always had, rough cedar siding, a stone chimney, a porch that creaked in the friendliest way, like it remembered laughter. "Marla," I said, "my place has been here longer than that HOA has existed." "Which is part of the problem," she replied, lips barely moving around the words. "Outdated septic systems, unregulated runoff, unsightly structures." Unsightly. That one landed. Not because it was true, but because I knew what she really meant. She meant I didn't fit her picture. I didn't have a new boat. I didn't have matching patio furniture, and I didn't show up to potlucks with a name tag and a smile. She leaned closer, lowering her voice like she was doing me a favor. "You can avoid legal escalation if you comply." And right then, something in me got still. I've seen people try to bluff in rooms with higher stakes than a lake HOA. I know the look. I took the envelope, turned it over once, and said, "You're going to want to sit down for what I'm about to tell you." "Excuse me," she snapped. I pointed, past her shoulder, to the only public boat ramp on the lake. The ramp her residents used every weekend. The ramp her HOA charged everyone for. The ramp her board bragged about in their glossy newsletters. "That ramp," I said, "is on my land." She laughed, short and sharp. "That's impossible." I nodded toward the water. "And the lake is mine too." Her smile twitched like it was trying not to crack. "You don't own a lake." "I do," I said. "Every drop." The wind moved through the pines, and for a second the only sound was her expensive shoes sinking into my gravel. She recovered fast, because people like Marla practice recovery. "If you're going to make ridiculous claims," she said, "I suggest you consult an attorney." "Already did," I told her, and that part wasn't even a lie. I just hadn't done it yet. She turned on her heel, marched back to her SUV, and left like she hadn't just lit a fuse. I stood there holding the eviction notice and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, exactly. More like the cold click of a door locking. Because that cabin isn't a vacation property to me. It's the only piece of my family that divorce court didn't strip away, the only place that still feels like my name belongs on it. And she'd just told me, with a straight face, that she planned to take it. I'm not going to pretend my life was perfect before Marla showed up. It wasn't. I came back from the Navy after 2 decades and walked straight into a marriage that was already halfway out the door. The divorce didn't just take money. It took my sense of footing. My ex got the house, the furniture, the future plans. I kept my tools, my truck, and my granddad's cabin because it was the one thing she didn't want. At the time, I thought that made it less valuable. Turns out it made it priceless. The cabin was built by my granddad, Leon Klein, after he came home from the Pacific. He wasn't the type to talk about what he saw, but he built like a man who needed quiet. Thick beams, tight joints, a fireplace that could make January feel survivable. After my divorce, that place held me together. I'd sit on the dock at night, listening to the water lap against old boards, telling myself, okay, you're still here. You still have somewhere to stand. Money was tight, I'll be honest. I did freelance marine surveying, small jobs, inspections, odd contracts. Enough to eat, enough to keep the truck running. Not enough to breathe easy. And right when Marla showed up with her eviction fantasy, I had a property tax bill staring me in the face. Not enormous, but big enough to hurt. The timing was too perfect. So I did what I do when something smells wrong. I started reading. My granddad's papers were in a metal box under his workbench. Old maps, receipts, handwritten notes, stuff most people would toss. I spread them out on my kitchen table like I was planning a mission. And there it was. A deed from 1946 that didn't just describe lakefront property. It described the lake. Boundaries, water rights, lakebed, access control, the whole thing. The more I read, the more my jaw tightened. Because Cedar Crest Shores wasn't just using the lake. They were charging for it. Their HOA dues included an amenities fee, and everyone knew what that meant. Boat ramp access, dock privileges, shoreline maintenance. I pulled their public budget from the state registry and did the math. 30-something households paying a few hundred a year, times 3 years. Tens of thousands, at least, collected under the assumption the HOA controlled access to a lake they didn't own. My lake, my ramp, my shoreline. I felt something bitter rise up. Not jealousy, not greed. More like betrayal. Because I'd let neighbors fish and swim for free for years. It felt normal. It felt neighborly. Marla turned that generosity into a business model. And then she had the nerve to claim my cabin was a threat. The contamination accusation came next, right on schedule. She hired an environmental consultant who showed up in a clean suit, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. He walked around my cabin with a frown that looked practiced. Your septic system is outdated, he announced. Potentially hazardous to the lake ecosystem. He handed me a report demanding emergency replacement within 3 weeks, or I'd be forced to vacate for public safety. 3 weeks. Funny, my tax deadline was about a month away. I asked him one question, real calm. What license do you hold? He said a bunch of letters fast, like he expected me to back down. I didn't. I looked him up later. The guy had a marketing degree and a certificate from a weekend course. That's it. His expertise was a costume. Meanwhile, I checked county records and found something even better. Marla had fast-tracked her own backyard improvements without permits. Concrete wash dumped near a drainage path. The same woman preaching environmental purity was pouring sludge where it didn't belong. So I called an attorney, not a fancy one, just a good one. An old friend from my service days, Grant Ellis, who'd moved into real estate law after he got out. I sent him photos, the forged-sounding eviction, the consultant report, my deed. He called me back and said, Mason, they're either stupid or they think you are. Probably the second, I said. Well, he replied, let's make that expensive for them. That's when the intimidation started. And yeah, it was the classic playbook. Anonymous complaints to my clients. A couple jobs got canceled with vague excuses. Late-night calls where nobody spoke, just breathing. One morning I walked out and found fresh oil dumped under my truck like they were trying to frame me for leaks. Another night, someone cut the rope on my small fishing boat during a storm. I caught it in time, barely. The first time, I told myself it was coincidence. The second time, I stopped lying to myself. Then came the betrayal that really did something to me. There was an older neighbor, Mrs. Dunn. She'd brought food over after my divorce, checked in on me, talked about her late husband like she still had one foot in the past. I trusted her. One evening, walking past her kitchen window, I heard my name. I heard Marla's voice, sharp and delighted, asking questions. How bad is his money situation? And Mrs. Dunn, soft as pie, answering like she was talking about the weather. He's stressed. He mentioned taxes. He won't last long. My chest went tight, like I'd swallowed a stone. It wasn't the $2,000 Marla probably offered her. It was the fact that she was willing to sell my private struggle. That was the moment I stopped being nice. Not cruel. Not reckless. Just finished. I didn't confront her. I didn't give Marla the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. I did something better. I started feeding them bad information. I told Mrs. Dunn I was thinking about giving up, maybe leaving for a while, maybe filing for bankruptcy. I let the rumor travel straight into Marla's hands like a gift. And while she got comfortable, I built my case. Cameras went up around the cabin, discreet. Every HOA notice, every threat, every email, every budget line item saved. Then I found a real landmine. The HOA's parking lot by the boat ramp, built partly on my land. Not by inches, either, by a chunk. Enough that every weekend, every time those residents parked to launch their boats, they were trespassing on paper. It wasn't about punishing families. It was about leverage. And Marla had no idea she'd been standing on my leverage the whole time. The showdown didn't happen in a courtroom first. It happened in a community meeting, because Marla's kind loves an audience when they think they're winning. She scheduled an emergency HOA assembly at the clubhouse, sent out emails about protecting property values, and made sure the agenda included one special item: resolution of the Klein cabin issue. Like I was a broken appliance. I showed up in clean jeans and a work jacket, not to look tough, just to look like myself. I sat in the back while Marla stood up front, smiling that polished smile, talking about contamination, safety, and uncooperative outsiders. Outsiders. I live closer to that lake than she does. She waved my eviction notice like a trophy. The board has determined, she announced, that Mr. Klein must vacate within 30 days to prevent further risk to the community. People murmured. A few looked uncomfortable, like they didn't love what they were hearing but didn't know how to challenge it. That's how bullies survive, on other people's silence. Grant stood up beside me. "Madam President," he said, calm as a glass of water, "before you continue, we'd like to present some information." Marla's smile tightened. "This is not the time, it's exactly the time," Grant replied. Then he handed out copies, not a stack of opinions, not a rant. Certified property records, deed language, survey maps, a clean diagram showing the boat ramp footprint, the parking lot intrusion, and the lake boundary. Grant spoke like he was explaining something simple to adults who deserve the truth. "Cedar Crest Shores does not own Clearwater Lake," he said, using the lake's real name, the name my granddad wrote on his maps. "Mr. Klein does. The HOA has been collecting access fees for an amenity it does not legally control." The room made that sound people make when the floor shifts, a low, confused wave of voices. Marla laughed, but it came out wrong. "That's absurd," she snapped. "You can't own water." Grant nodded. "In this state, you can, under specific grants and recorded water rights, which Mr. Klein holds." Marla's face went hard. Even if that were true, he's still violating environmental standards. And that's when I stood up. I'm not a speech guy. I don't enjoy being stared at. But I looked right at her and said, "Marla, I had my septic inspected less than a year ago. Here's the report. And your consultant's credentials are a joke." I held up the paperwork. Then, because I was tired of her performance, I added, "Also, you want to talk about contamination? Let's talk about your unpermitted concrete work and where that runoff goes." Someone in the front row whispered, "Wait, what?" Grant slid another packet onto the table. "Permit records. Photos. Dates." Marla's eyes flicked, quick. For the first time, she looked like she wasn't holding all the cards. People started asking questions, real ones. Where do our fees go? Are we legally allowed to use the ramp? What happens if there's an accident on the lake? And that last one, the accident question, did something. Because it wasn't about gossip anymore. It was about liability. It was about families realizing they'd been paying into a system that could bankrupt them if something went wrong. Marla tried to regain control, voice rising. "This is harassment. This is intimidation." Grant didn't flinch. "No," he said. "This is disclosure." Then the twist that nobody saw coming, including me, honestly. Mrs. Dunn stood up, hands shaking, face red. "I need to say something," she whispered. The room quieted, because nobody expects the sweet old lady to become the turning point. "Marla asked me to keep tabs on Mason," she said, voice cracking. "She offered me money. And I took it. And I'm ashamed." You could hear breathing, people shifting in their seats. Mrs. Dunn pulled a manila envelope out of her purse. "But I kept copies," she continued, eyes wet. "Not because I planned it. Because I couldn't sleep." She dropped the envelope on the table. Inside were emails, cash withdrawal slips, board notes, a draft agreement with a development group called Northline Leisure Partners, plans for lakefront redevelopment, estimates, timelines, and a line item labeled facilitation fee. Marla's name was all over it. The room erupted. Not loud cheering, Something sharper. Outrage. Betrayal. 30 families realizing the lake they loved was being treated like a coupon code. I raised both hands, trying to calm the noise. Listen, I said. I'm not here to punish you. That got their attention because people were braced for war. I'm here to stop her. I took a breath and said the sentence I'd been rehearsing in my head for days. I own the lake and the ramp. But I'm not cutting you off. I'm offering legit access agreements. Fair, written, recorded. A fraction of what you've been paying. And the money goes to actual maintenance, not someone's BMW. A few people laughed, bitter. A few nodded like they'd been waiting for permission to breathe. Marla's voice cut through, thin and furious. You can't do this. I can, I said, and I kept my tone level because that's what breaks people like her. And you did this to yourself. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, but the damage was already done. Within a week, the board voted her out. Within 2, the county opened an investigation into the HOA's finances and the developer partnership. Families demanded audits, refunds, answers. I filed a quiet title action to make the ownership crystal clear and protect the lake from future nonsense. And for a minute, it felt like justice had actually showed up on time. Here's the part that keeps the story from ending neatly. After all that, after the votes and the investigation and the headlines in the local paper, I got a letter in the mail. Different logo, different company, same tone. We'd like to discuss potential access solutions for community benefit. No threat this time, just a polite little reach, like a hand sliding across a table. And it made my stomach tighten because it told me something simple. Marla wasn't the only one who saw value in that lake. She was just the one arrogant enough to try to steal it in daylight. So now I'm asking you, because I genuinely want to hear it, where do you draw the line between community rules and straight-up bullying? If you were in my boots, would you have shut the ramp down and let everyone suffer to make a point? Or would you do what I did and try to protect the good people while taking out the parasite? And have you ever watched an HOA, a developer, or some self-appointed leader try to erase someone because they thought the person was too quiet to fight back? Drop your story in the comments. I read them, I really do. And tell me whether you think this ends with Marla in cuffs, or with someone else trying the same play under a new name. Because I've got a feeling the lake isn't done teaching lessons yet.